Hey everybody, welcome back to the Spin Rack. I'm here with my boys PD and Kyle. What's up, gents?
What up?
Ready to
Oh my
rock.
gosh, that was slow, bro. Say it again. What's up?
What up?
Ready to
All
rock.
right, that's what I'm saying. Hey, we're talking about the Death of Superman 30th anniversary special number one. What the heck are they doing? Do we need this again? So once more, DC in a grab for money is putting out a very highly anticipated
It's his anniversary.
and
Anniversary. It's
another money
our
grab.
anniversary.
DC is putting out the anniversary of the death of Superman. Probably one of the most iconic Superman titles around. Um, of course, we have our resident Superman expert, PD, here to help discuss and explain why they would do this once
Stop
again.
it.
PD, can you give us a little background? Of course, this is going to be it's going to sell. Was
Why
it a good story when it
starting
came out
up?
30 years
You
ago?
see, I have the underground shirt. That has nothing to do with Superman.
Okay. I'm saying, PD, was this
Someone else has a Superman shirt on the show.
so? PD, I'm asking you
You
a
one
question.
of the since he was did you write some stuff on this recently?
Who? Me? No. I mean,
Cal.
since you're not answering, I'll ask Cal. Cal, since PD refuses to take the mic on this one, can
Oh
you
my
please
god.
elaborate with us? Was this a good story when it came out 30 years ago? Do we need to do this once again?
Was it a good story when it came out 30 years ago? Obviously, yes. Do we need to do it again from a business standpoint? Obviously, yes. Why? Because it sells. It consistently sells for DC. This is something a publisher wants to have when you have a stable as wide as DC or Marvel Comics would have. You want to go back to things that you can bring into the audience and they will still want to read it again. And it brings in new readers and it sells across the board, not just the Superman people, which is one of the big criticisms I've always had with Superman books. They don't sell too well because normally the only people interested in are Superman collectors. And Superman collectors really don't want to spend money on books, with the exception of the Golden Age stuff, which they're still afraid of paying for. But Death of Superman sold across the board. So if you were a Superman fan, Batman fan, Flash fan, Spider Man fan, X-Men fan, everybody knew about this event, everybody read it, and then you go 30 years later, people who might have missed out and weren't there for the actual event wouldn't mind picking up something commemorative that feels a little bit special, kind of makes up for the fact that they weren't there. The biggest thing that I can point to is DC has released The Death of Superman in omnibus form 4 times, up to I believe the latest one was might have been this year. So we're talking 4 omnibuses. These are hundreds of pages that they have done this for the death of Superman. It sells out each time. They're all out of print. Okay, it's up to the fourth printing when it comes to the death of Superman in omnibus form, and it's out of print. And these are not cheap. All right, you're paying $100+ for these omnibuses, and they sell out. So, good idea. Yes. Are they going to keep doing it? Oh, you bet they're going to keep doing it because it's a guaranteed money maker, especially for a character that DC, for whatever reason, struggles, to market. But this, I mean, all you got to do is put a bloody S on front of the cover. For some reason, everybody perks up. One last thing I'll say, they produced a ton of variant covers, high end variant covers for this particular event. They were all online. You had to get them from respective stores or you had to be at a con to get them. They have all sold out. We're talking some issues over $100, foil covers, uh, the bloody S on a gold background, bloody S on a silver background, bloody S on a red foil background, all sold out regardless of price. So, yes, this is something that needed to happen.
Well, it's one of the hard parts at the time when comics were just in such a disarray. I'll commend DC for doing what they had to do to get some people to back to buying DC because they already were there, but they were losing sort of the buzz, even though Image was kind of trying to steal their thunder with their supposed beating them in the market share, which they actually didn't because they didn't produce those books, but they still had the street cred that they had beat out DC. So they wanted to get some notice, and this definitely gave them some notice with a big, I don't know how many 8 parts, if you include the Justice League of Fighting, of the Doomsday Destroying stuff, and ending with obviously the death. But it was for me, it's kind of one of those books that was it was kind of the more of a one more event to buy, and it was kind of like this is just kind of mowing through. But they kind of had the death, death for a friend. The stories afterwards is what kind of solidified the story because they did some solid stories afterwards. So it was kind of doing a big event, but then how they dealt with it was kind of decent. And then they kind of pumped up the more interesting characters. They introduced some other Superman characters, which would then lead to you wanting the real one back. Whereas people tell the story, quote unquote, the Image guys, they would tell the story that nobody cared when Superman came back because the retailers had some stuff they couldn't sell. But at the same point, the crash was happening. Everyone knew it was starting to already happen. So this is the game you play with comic books. You at some point you got a ton of dazzlers you can't get rid of. But when it initially came out, there was a big buzz around it. So the stories themselves, what they did during that period, outside of the ponytail, was pretty solid. They were solid before the death. So you had this thing for me. You had solid stories before the death, solid stories after the death. But the death was just this big event that worked, and DC's tried to recreate it in the animated series, animated movies. So it's a thing. They got Roger Stern did the novel, so in many mediums this thing's been retold. So and the anniversary shows that it's a big deal too. It's still a big deal.
You know what?
And it all sold out.
And look, I gotta say that I saw this story when it first came out, and I wasn't interested then. And I saw the story again years later, and I wasn't interested then either. And I watched the movie and was like, eh. So, can you tell me why in the story?
Which movie did you watch?
The animated one.
Which one?
I don't know. The last one? I don't know which one it is. I didn't know there were different versions. I thought there was just one.
There's different versions.
Oh, did not know. So why this is such a seminal book to go? Because Superman dies, or because there's something more to it that it shows that the people needed Superman to come back, or was it just a money grab by DC once again? To just say, hey,
it was a money grab that they did well, but it's a money grab that they ended. They landed post the money grab pretty well. So they did everything you're supposed to cover. Was it a black? They had a sealed comic, that sort of thing. They had a bunch of things out of there. A lot of as you already said, there was a lot of stuff that went along with it that worked with the times. Because what's that thing? X-Force had the sealed comic. I think Spider-Man had the sealed comic book. So ultimately, that you'd almost have a mint comic book because it was already sealed. Like it was going to be your 10, your score of a 10 instead of 9.8 because it's already sealed. If you there's no way to they still find a way to take a point off, but it's like playing to that speculative market, which worked. I mean, that's what the Image guys were doing. The Image guys really kind of market that plan, and then they say, hey, well, DC, you guys, come on, man, killing Superman, that's kind of like that's messing up the game. Like this is a real no, they already messed up the game, and you just got to play. Once you start doing Spider-Man #1s and X-Men #1s, X-Men and Spider-Man are already like 25 cents more in the regular newsstand editions, so they already were gouging people price wise. So DC, I mean, you got to give them credit. They finally did something that really they already had like the X-Men thing. People complained, oh, they did the Legends of Superman, Legend of Batman, or the Legends of the Dark Knight, but they did the cardboard covers. Oh my God, what do these cardboard covers mean? It's just one other thing for you to buy. That's what it was. Like they came up with a gimmick, and the same thing. What the cards that was in X-Force was great. No, it's just another gimmick. So you gotta, you have to play to the market. That's what the market is these big fights with these cool looking characters. And that's the thing, even people who, kind of like pros that kind of looked at the story was kind of like, yeah, they realize, like Doomsday is a cool character for, people to fight. And ultimately they did another thing, was it the Doomsday Hunter Prey? A little after that was a 4-part Prestige thing. So you had 3 parts. It was like this big sort of thing that to come back to that they were able to monopolize this sort of thing where they had a character that was cool and he would show up at times, and then he became the benchmark of DC, where they're like, hey, Guy Gardner Warrior, he's gonna become a Doomsday level character. Immediately he can fight Superman. It's like, yeah, Guy Gardner Warrior, yeah, he's cool. Hugh Smith, chill. But anyway. But yeah, it was for the time. I had to give him credit for doing it, because whether I liked it or not, they had to do something to really kind of shut everyone up, because there's always a story that I think on the Liefeld podcast is saying DC was happy being second. Well, they weren't. They went for Superman, then Batman followed, and they didn't really. They were hinting that it was going to be Wonder Woman, but they didn't do like a big marketing sort of thing. They just had a book that came at the same time, but didn't relate to the actual what was going on in Wonder Woman. So, this is what you got to do at this time. You had to do something to make this thing, make fans notice you, and that's what Marvel had been doing for a while. So with the Massacre and all these other events that seemingly didn't amount to much, in the Fall of the Mutants and all that stuff. So it was every year, every summer, and then they found out ways to do events in the winter. So this is what happened. DC did. DC was doing events. They had big ones like Millennium and stuff like that, but Invasion. But this is like the real, and they were top selling, whether people remember or not. Millennium was like they had Batman, Millennium, and then the X-Men. So Millennium was weekly. So those things was selling too, but this is the big one that everyone remembers.
So just to break it down, this was what, 4 stories, 4 comics? Death of Superman.
No.
Superman. Sorry?
No, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't 4 comic books.
How much was it? How many? Give us a breakdown. Give us a bit of background on this.
Like all together?
Yeah.
I know you can do it. Give it to us. Issues. Give it in order.
No, you don't have to give it to us in order. Just give us.
We gotta give it to him. No, we got. He can do it. I'm betting.
No, we don't want to put him on the spot like that.
No, we can put him on the spot. He can do
Action Comics starts. Okay, just the Death of Superman storyline is Action Comics 684, Adventures of Superman 497, Justice League of America 69, and then Superman Man of Steel 18 and 19, and then Superman 74 to 75. That's just the Death of Superman stuff. Now,
pay me my money. Mario, Mars, pay me my money.
In the Reign of the Superman,
Reign of the Superman is the last part. Everybody forgets about Funeral for a Friend. But before I even get into that, one of the things, this was just a confluence of events that really worked out well, because this wasn't planned. Originally, DC just wanted to have Superman and Lois Lane get married, and then they couldn't do it because you had the Superman and Lois TV series, and they were like, no, we want to do that on TV, and we want that to coincide with the comics, so you guys got to hold off on that. And so they would get together, and they would have whatever retreat, and they were like, so what are we going to do? And according to what the writers would say, the joke was always, oh, let's kill him, and everybody would laugh because, you can't kill Superman. But that year, it actually got some steam, and this is what we got out of it. But I don't think DC or anybody attached to it thought it would resonate with what it did. It got picked up by the newspapers. You had people, newspapers were picking it up. TV was picking it up. I don't know how far outside of the States the coverage was, but it turned out to be a pretty big deal. But it's the story in totality that has actually worked for me. If you just go by the Death of Superman, which are those issues that I just put out, this could really just be a throwaway story. When you add in Funeral for a Friend, Reign of the Superman, all of that story together, it's a really big story that's very, very well written. And that's the big difference at the end of the day. Not just the spectacle of killing off Superman, which most people already know he's going to come back, but also a lot of people who didn't believe they would do it, that they would actually execute it. And then there was like a 2-month period where no comics came out for Superman at all. And then, of course, you're like, well, what exactly is going to happen next when that type of stuff comes down. So there were a lot of things. I mean, I would like to say it was like a once in a lifetime thing, but the fact that it keeps selling so well shows that there was, this is a story that just had a lot of resonance. It's also the last, these are like the last stories of what John Byrne and company introduced with the reboot, because Superman became significantly stronger hereafter. So this was a story that you could only do this time period. Once like from 1986, 1992, you had a Superman that this was possible for, and there's no way you could do stories like that before, and you can't do the stories like that after. But going on, Funeral for a Friend runs through Action Comics 685, 686,
Wait, hold on a
Adventures
second.
of
Funeral for a Friend. What is that?
Funeral for a Friend. That's the second part, and that deals with all of the characters and how they react to Superman's death. That's Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Perry White, but also characters like Batman, Supergirl, the Justice League, his parents, how everybody reacts to the fact that Superman is dead. Metropolis, the world, President of the United States posthumously gave Superman American citizenship after he had died.
I was right. He didn't have his citizenship. I was so right about that.
Oh, all right.
Thank you for bringing that up. Posthumously, legal area.
Anyway, Adventures 498 to 500. Adventures 498 to 500. Justice League 70, Superman 76 to 77, and 83, I think. Superman, Man of Steel 20 to 21. Action. Yeah, that's the whole Funeral for a Friend, and the rest is the Reign of Superman.
So here's a question: who actually developed the initial death of Superman, and then the rest of the arcs? Was it?
That was
Jurgens.
That was Roger Stern, Jerry Ordway, Dan Jurgens, and Louise Simonson. Everybody who was Carl Kessel, I think, might have been. I don't know if he was there at the initial planning stages, but everybody. There was a triangle. There used to be what they would call like the. You know what? I can't. I don't want to mess it up, but all of the books pretty much bled into each other. So So if you read Superman, and they would have numbers on the book, so you would know where you were in terms of the reading. But these guys, worked very tightly together. And so when it came time, they would have these planning things to make certain that the stories coincided with each other. And so then you had the death. When you had the death of Superman, everybody was in on it. Dan Jurgens, however, gets the biggest amount of attention because Dan Jurgens did Superman 75, and that's the book in which he died. So a lot of people are familiar with that book, picked it up, and so Dan Jurgens' art and Dan Jurgens' name coincides with it a lot more strongly than, say, Louise Simonson. Rather, Dan Jurgens' name coincides stronger than everybody else's. The average person would think Dan Jurgens did the whole thing, and that's not the case. Dan Jurgens himself will say that, but Superman 75 was the preeminent book of the series, and that was Dan Jurgens who did the art. I believe he did the art and the story on that.
They also gave him, I think, he was kind of like, I don't know, I guess when giving him the 0 hour, kind of felt like he was giving, DC was giving him the keys, making him the new Marv Wolfman. Like, here, go work with the DC, do your own Crisis, have fun. And he kind of, what was it? I think Ordway inked it, but it was kind of still felt like this is Jurgens' time, and he was kind of like he got to do the Superman Fantastic Four crossover. He did some acclaimed stuff with the Valiant characters, where there was a big buzz around that. And then, of course, while Superman stuff was winding down, they pulled him over into the Marvel stuff, where he was doing Cap and Thor. And he did the Spider-Man, sensational Spider-Man with the blonde hair, the Ben Reilly stuff. But yeah, he was. For a while there, he was like one of the names that you pull for as a writer. Whereas the other parts were Stern, Ordway. They were all both, had been writing with Jurgens all that time, but they didn't seem to come off with the title with the same sort of hoopla.
And the death of Superman affected a whole bunch of comics, even Spider-Man. The direct effect you can see with DC was Batman, having his back broken by Bane and somebody replacing him. Even though the Batman writers say, "Oh, we weren't influenced by all," like, yeah, okay. But even as far as Spider-Man, we had the whole clone thing where Spider-Man ends up being dead and being replaced. All of that was from Death of Superman. And the inertia, the momentum that they generated from Death of Superman pretty much kept Superman up until the early 2000s. Superman was You know, he was still carrying DC on his shoulders up until about that point, and all of it was from that storyline. So it was I mean, it was just a really big event, and I mean, I'm hard pressed to think of another event for DC Comics that really did the same thing for them. I mean, because Nightfall with Batman, or Nightfall, Night's End, that that was, again, I think that was a longer storyline than Death of Superman, and it definitely sold well, but not the same, but definitely not the same resonance of the Death of Superman. The Wonder Woman stuff, no, definitely not. And I can't think of anything. Well, Marvel had its own stuff going on, but the fact that you would read, I mean, the fact that you had a Spider-Man, storyline that was obviously influenced by what was going on with Superman was pretty telling as to how much that story resonated. I can't think of it, and I just can't think of another storyline from that time period, like 90s into the early 2000s, that had that much punch as that one did. It was just a really big story for DC, and it still is.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that people were saying like, "Hey, how could they kill off Superman?" That was just, I mean, why would you do something like that? There was a whole reaction.
That's not what you said. I remember what you said. You were like, "Yay, yay!"
I'm saying what people were saying. I didn't say what I was saying.
You were like, "Yes, finally! I knew they could do it. I knew they could do it." He was like, "Great." They were like, "Here, where's Batman? Here, Batman, put this S on your chest. We got it now. We got it. It's good. It's good." And the second he came back, you were like, "What? Trash."
I just felt that they didn't give the chance for Batman to take in the role if needed be, But hey, that's neither here or there. Look, we are giving celebration to the 30th anniversary.
Batman's gonna put on the armor and fight Doomsday
and win. And so,
yeah, all right.
The thing is that they didn't. This is the 30th anniversary of this, and we don't want to digress and go to Batman. People who hate Batman and stuff like that, So look, it affected. What about you, Petey? How did it affect you when you first saw the story?
No, I mean, as I said, it was, I kind of took it as, as the event that it was. I think that it did affect comic books in such a way that, you see a lot of Marvel like killed everyone they could.
Petey thought it was trash.
No. Well, the thing of it is, I would buy, whichever issue that I liked, I'd buy some Man of Steel, that sort of thing. I didn't see reason to do it, but at the same time, it was hard to see, like Jurgen was trying to build up the Justice League, like, hey, we're going to do a serious Justice League, and then we do the Doomsday storyline. Doomsday just mows over the Justice League, and it's just like, you're basically saying that they're ultimately lame. Like Superman's doing he's at a talk show while the Justice League is getting over, and like, was it Bloodwind? Like, we don't know his powers, but it's kind of being like a Rob Liefeld type character, and they punch Bloodwind and he just disappears. Like, Bloodwind has died, but they don't know he's not actually dead. And like, they basically Doomsday stepping on Blue Beetle, and it's just like, Blue Beetle's human, like, but it's like it brought in that video game type of action where it's kind of like. But and they're supposed to be. That's the thing. Jurgen was like, "Yeah, we're gonna do a serious thing. We bring back all the classic characters," and slowly they just got mowed over. So it was just kind of hard to say, "Okay, this is a definite, big Superman storyline." And I think I definitely bought. Obviously, I bought Superman 75, but I wanted to see like Grummet's issues because I liked his art. I liked John Bogdanove, his stuff. So I bought that issue. It was kind of tougher because I think I talked about it before, because Jurgens was just really imaging out when he drew this issue, where he did the splash page issue. And it's just like, I'm not adhering to anything. I'm just doing wherever I want to, what I feel is the coolest shots ever, page to page. So it's more like a gallery type book, even though there's a story that kind of in 75. But when I got to I think I came back more in the rain, but I read a couple of the Funeral for a Friend, obviously the Man of Steel one. Though that was a book I kind of read the most, because I think I think Ordway was kind of taking his leave at that point. But yeah, I read most of when the rain came. I was reading all of those books, and all those books were a lot of fun. But then at the same time, like the X-Men get a lot of credit for Age of Apocalypse, but it's really like the reign of Superman, like to start in the books and start up with new names. Like it's like, come on, Spider-Man took on new characters. This is just like, come on, everyone kind of took this and took it for their inspiration. Like I think if you look at Youngblood, when Rob Liefeld came back to it, he was trying to do like real storytelling. He was trying to get into he's keeping Bad Rock as Bad Rock, but Shaft was going through this personal struggle, and he was trying to get to his sort of note when he was doing it, and he was like trying to do the storyline. But then 2 seconds later, I think it was the guy with I forget his name, but he had a black guy had a skull in his face. He kind of decided that that guy was going to die and go to hell. So it'd be kind of something character that can connect to Spawn stuff. So immediately once I think but he also said he looked at
Chapel.
Chapel, yeah. He said he looked at a Mark Silvestri book where he said all this badass stuff was happening. So then he killed him. But it's just like, no, you got to look at this Death of Superman where everyone was trying to do some sort of death of a character to make it poignant. And like even the later story that they did with Alan Moore, where you find, well, he was doing more, what's the name, where they kill one of the characters and they have this big trial. He's doing the OJ story. Death was this big thing, and death had even been a big thing since the death of Feral Lad, the death of Captain Stacy, Gwen Stacy, death of Phoenix. As you go along, even Guardian to some extent. But as you went, it was select, and the fans were kind of getting to a point when, like, they did Superman's death. The fans were like, we don't really believe this. As you keep going, they say these characters probably coming back. Rogue had seemingly died, and they were like, and the comic book stores were trying to pump up, hey, Rogue died, even though she went to Sage Perilous, but it was nothing. No one was catching traction anymore because people didn't believe it. They were like, none of it's real. And then when you get to this, it was actually real for, if not for the fans, for the speculators. And that's the thing that was finally caught on, whereas you had something like Death of Phoenix, which was like, had this heavy weight. And then when you finally got to Superman, you had this thing where whether it was a story where he's going to come back or not, it had the weight where people actually went out and bought it. They said and complained, but at the same time, they put it in their, they put it in their collection where they were saving it. That's the thing where it was actually real to the people, where they said, this is it, we're buying into it. So
I remember reading it in real time, and I heard about it, and I never really focused on a lot of the hype. A lot of stuff I learned about, well, let me not say hype, but the behind the scenes stuff, I would find out about that stuff later, like most people did. But I did know that supposedly, you would hear the buzz, oh, Superman's going to die. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you can't kill Superman. He's indestructible. He's always going to be around. And I remember just reading it. And then the other thing is, I didn't read all the Superman titles. I would read Superman. I was primarily just reading Superman. So then I had to go back and say, oh, wait a minute, this stuff that I missed. So I would go back and read this. And I'm like, what the hell is going on actually here? I was like looking at this dude, and I was like, well, Superman should have took care of this dude already. That should have been the end of it. And if you went throughout the fight, there were points where it looked like, okay, I think the first time they match up, he kind of like puts him down. He says, I'll come back and deal with this guy later. Looks like, he's on ice for right now. No, this dude keeps coming in until we get to 75. So in real time, it was almost some catching up for me. And then at one point I realized, oh, they're really going to do this. Like they're really going to go through with this and kill him. And I was like, okay. And then of course you have the issue, but as I said earlier, what came after helps to really lift it up from just like a big punch out fest, which were those initial, Doomsday comes in and like Peter already said, he just lays waste to everybody. Okay, everybody's Wonder Woman, the rest of the Justice League, anybody who could be there for Doomsday to actually beat up, all those guys were there to cement the fact of how big of threat Doomsday was. Now, of course, if you like some of these characters, you're like, what are you talking about? Bloodwing would, they're like, no, sorry. Sorry.
There's nothing to like about Bloodwind, but it's just like he really he turned into a puff of nothing, and it's just like, read later to find out what happened to Bloodwind. Like, does anybody care? But it's like these guys are extra lame. Like,
but but Superman's the only character within the DC stable that you could tell this story with this particular sense of resonance because I mean, look, he's central to without Superman, the DC universe does not exist. So, that's one. But then also the level of power that this guy has, that he's always brought to the table, which is where to the point in 1986 when they do the reboot, they're like, no, no, we got to scale back a lot of this guy's power and ability, so we can try to, get him out there to readers, which they were successful in doing. Lost the reader in me initially because I was like, I don't really want to read any of this. I like Superman to be uber powerful, and then you just come up really good stories around that. But then they did some stuff that actually brought me back into the fold. So I was still reading when they were getting up to Superman 75. I was a regular reader. But the rest of, I mean, because you can see with the other characters, I mean, this went from Superman all the way to Green Arrow, where they had Green Arrow dying. I mean, they killed off Green Arrow. He died in a helicopter explosion, and when they brought him back, they literally went to heaven to bring him back. That's where Green Arrow was. So that's how deeply it affected the DC titles, where you have your Magnificent Seven from the Justice League, and it touched on all of them. Everybody got touched from Superman all the way down to Green Arrow. So nobody was unscathed, if you will, from the storyline. But again, it was it probably the pivotal moment. The pivotal moment in the whole thing is when they bring Superman back, and the reaction that you got from readers wasn't, oh, we need to burn these comics because we only invested in them hoping this dude was going to stay dead. Well, there was a few people like that. I won't say any names, Mars, but there were a few people who were like, oh man, there goes my investment. But the reaction to seeing him back and how they resolved the whole storyline in traditional comic book fashion, was very well received. So it's I don't know. I mean, on one hand, I want to say it's a product of its time because there's all these things going on and all of them play into it. But the fact that they've been able to go with this from comics to a novelization, it was an animated movie once. It was an animated movie where they expanded on it. Again, they've attempted to do it in film, and that attempt was very poor. And they'll probably keep going back to this. I mean, eventually we will see a big screen treatment of this once they can actually, get Superman up and running in film. We'll definitely see this as well. So, it's just, I mean, I can't, and I say this again, I can't think for DC Comics. I just can't think of another event that had this type of resonance. And it's unlikely. It's sort of like Michael Jackson's Thriller. It's unlikely that it'll happen again.
Well, one thing I wanted to bring up is which was smart on their half, is to come up with a character that was a double reveal. Because you look at the original costume, and they were trying to let you know this isn't a DC character because he comes, he has the tender sort of moment where he kind of the bird comes to his hand and then he crushes it. So to show this is not like the Hulk type of thing. This is a character who doesn't.
They stole that. They stole that from the Hulk. They stole that scene from you. You know the issue, the first Byrne issue, where the deer comes over and he just backfists the deer, kills it.
But the deer attack. That's the difference. The Hulk, if the Hulk is attacked, he would react. This Doomsday had the bird just land on him and just like, no, we're gonna go worse than the old school Hulk. We're gonna go to where he's that. But it has the Deadpool, like the what's the name, the character, like the old school, the 90s type of Man of Mystery. So he has these gadgets like Cable. So he had a little bit of like Deadpool and Cable in this initial thing, but they also had as this thing which slowly strip away, because I didn't really see anything protruding initially, but when they draw it now, you see the shoulders kind of and the ankles kind of protruding. But it was kind of a big reveal because they had this cool design that, like artists still, like drawing, because they did kind of do a cool character in this Doomsday thing. But when you initially get it, it's a mystery character that's revealed over time, where his costume slowly falls apart, and then he's just this like warrior type of thing, which has these claws and it's a bone thing. But I think Bone was it. I don't know if it was before the Wolverine bone claws or not, but
Yeah,
having
yeah. Those bone those bone protrusions around his face, his elbows, his knees, that
yeah.
stuff.
So it had this thing where it could be a little bit of a Wolverine thing, but a little but different because the actual his elbows and his knees had things that he could like stab Superman with. So it's one of the things that's really played up what the Image guys was doing, but at the same, that's smart for doing that because it had a man of mystery and had like this where he came from. We don't know where he came from, so we immediately thinking Cable, but then it slowly strips down to this other design that's like, wow, they came up with something cool for Superman to fight, and that's one of the things that's been the biggest hurdle over time is having a villain that's memorable. And the hard part is that they weren't able to keep the weight of the initial story. But I guess in the Hunter Prey they kind of had it, but as they go on and other writers come in and just kind of say, all right, here's the definitive Superman beat up Doomsday, it's over type of thing.
I
But
mean, how do you do it? I mean, it's like you remember that cartoon where Daffy Duck is competing with Bugs Bunny, and he
yeah,
eventually
yeah.
he puts on the devil costume, and he pretty much blows himself up, and the audience loves it. And they're like, Daffy, they love you, they love me. He's like, yeah, but I can only do it once. I can only kill myself once. So this is the same type of storyline. You can only really do you can only make Doomsday with a character like Superman. That's one of the reasons why his rogues gallery is usually said not to be very strong, because how many times can he go up against the Parasite before he just puts this dude down permanently and says, look, it's not going to happen anymore. So it's not like with the Spider-Man villains where, okay, these guys could all gang up, or maybe we'll take away his his spider sense, and we might be able to get some mileage out of that. It's Superman, and you create these really big guys for him to fight, but it's like how many usages do you really get out of it? And with that being said, they still keep bringing Doomsday back, and everybody seems to buy into it. They're like, okay, we're going to fight him again. All right, is he going to use super speed? What about these powers here? No, he's just going to fight him toe to toe. Well, how about he throws him into space this time and lets him just sit there in orbit until he's ready to deal with them? Nah, we're going to fight him toe to toe. We're going to fight him toe to toe again. So that type of stuff is hilarious in terms of the approach, but also the readership. How the readership hoists this much stuff on this particular character. But Doomsday for me was a one usage character that got a lot more mileage than a one usage character ever should. And next week he's going to get a little bit more.
Well,
you have I mean, in the canon of Superman stories, is this the best out there? I mean, I think of stories, iconic stories,
Death of Superman?
like
Is
Red
this the
Sun.
best? Is this the best? No, Red Sun, those type of stories are alternative Superman.
Yeah.
And you can always do a lot of stuff with alternatives. Making a great story within the canon where you've got to regard where this character needs to be in terms of canon, because there's going to be some stuff after. That's a lot more difficult for the average writer. So, I mean, you have stories like
you don't consider that a good Superman story?
well, Kingdom Come again. That's out of canon. That's a possible future. All Star Superman. That's an homage to the Silver Age, Silver Age Superman. Like his, some last stories over there, and you can go on with that. Another Nail. You got plenty of great Superman stories that are outside of the canon that resonate with readers, but it's harder to do that in canon, and that's for most characters. If you were to look and say, "Oh, what's your favorite, Batman story, favorite Spider-Man story?" A lot of times, guys will tap stories that had nothing to do with the actual canon because there's more freedom outside of canon in order to do such. Within canon, I would say no, this is not the best Superman story. However, you know, anybody would ask me, well, what do you think it is? And if I offered these particular stories, they would compare them against the Death of Superman in terms of numbers, people reached. And one of the biggest things with it is that this Death of Superman is a story I can recommend to anyone. I could recommend this to a comic book reader. I could recommend this to a non-comic book reader, Superman fan, non-Superman fan, and you can get people in on it. Where a lot of the Superman stuff I may like and say, oh no, this was so great. It was so square with this character. Really read this. And guys will shrug their shoulders like, because they're not regular Superman readers. This, you didn't have to be a regular Superman reader to get it. This is meat and potatoes storytelling, story driven. You know what's gonna happen. You know where it's going. Even the last book is nothing but big splash pages. How do you beat it? So it's hard pressed to come up with something else because this was so successful.
A giant WWF episode, huh?
Well, that's a good way to say it.
Didn't you like?
Yeah.
Didn't you like? What is that? The one before Byrne started Superman. The one that ended the run.
Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow?
Is it that's what it's called? Probably that's what.
That's the one. That's the one he's talking about.
I think you said that.
Yeah, but again, that's not a canon story. That's outside of canon. That's an imaginary story as to what may have happened to Superman when they were ending the Bronze Age Superman's run. At least in that fashion. Those aren't canon stories. Are okay. We had a really good run of Batman 449 to 479, or like Batman Hush, which a lot of people really really enjoyed, and that's a canon story. Everybody's where they're supposed to be. It's not Batman in the future. It's not Batman in an alternative storyline. It's not Batman in an Elseworld. That's Batman proper, and everybody really, a lot of people really enjoyed that storyline. So it's difficult to do that in canon because you've got to play with the toys and then leave them in a manner that the next guy can come over, unless you're Joe Quesada who wants to break everything. Say, screw you, kid. Now let's see you build a sandcastle now.
Okay.
Well, although what you're describing though is one of the issues that I have is having the stories that people like in the 70s, the stories people would pick out for, like, not to say just to go, not to go to Superman, but to say like the Hulk, like they go to Cracker Jackson being the one that, oh, this is the Hulk story, that sort of thing. Whereas now, what event worked? Like a Red Sun? Oh, we can say, you know what? Like Crisis centered around Superman by the end of it, or at least the Golden Age Superman. This is the greatest Superman story. And it's just like, can we get the one issue, the old school book length novel that DC used to do, and find one of those that were the Superman, the one that worked, like the original Death of Superman, like the original one from the Silver Age, that sort of thing, where it's just like, it's like, if you look at it, it's not really the big slam bam sort of fight, but it's like, and that's what's kind of lost on the fans today, where it's just like, well, Kingdom Come is it, because at the end of the day, well, no, Superman's going to kick ass and kill everybody at the end, and luckily there were some people left to say, hey, no, it's not as bad as we think, Superman, calm down. As a Superman has been through hell in Kingdom Come, and he almost goes over the edge. So, but yeah, I think we kind of lost the thing of what event lasted, and this is one that lasted. So
they kind of did that. They kind of did that to us because, I mean, in terms of DC Comics, Crisis was an event. It was this big event, brought in a lot of people. This will change a whole bunch of stuff. But the biggest thing that Crisis did is said, oh, all that stuff that came before, you don't got to read any of that. You don't got to regard any of that. It's all new. We're all going forward from that. And then all of the stories, which for the most part are one-shots, I mean, you just referenced, this was an imaginary story, but this was Superman 149 with Jerry Siegel writing the death of Superman, which was ironic to say the least, but a really good story. And the only way you would have been hip to that is if you had picked up something like the greatest Superman stories ever told, because most guys wouldn't have been able to get it, in a comic shop, back issue wise. And you look at that and it's like, oh wow, it's really good. It's a really good story. Or Superman Red, Superman Blue from that time period. And DC pretty much said, no, there's a dividing line. There's post-crisis, post-crisis and pre-crisis, and you don't got to read any of this stuff. Here you can just go forward, and made a whole bunch of that stuff obsolete. So most guys are going by the events, the big stories. Whatever the crossovers were, everything that had a lot of spectacle with it, as opposed to what you just said. Like, this was just a really good single issue that nailed it on all fronts, and then, leaves open the next story to do something different.
Yeah, that's I don't know. It's a weird thing of this period, because with that when you look at I don't know, when you said something about Crisis. And yeah, that's the point I was going to say, that with you can see it in Who's Who. They were really trying to say, if we have somebody that died in Crisis, we'll highlight them. We'll highlight Supergirl that died. We won't highlight the other Supergirl that came before that one. There was a bunch of stuff that they were just like, nope, this is what it is. Here's Superman 2 and the Golden Age Superman. And they didn't go, hey, here's the first Supergirl, and then here's Kara Zor-El. So stuff that they were just like, nah, all that nutty stuff, we got rid of that. But then it's like, oh no, Crisis got rid of that, because I think the Who's Who came out before Man of Steel was out. But at the same time, it was gearing up for it. And that style of how they were doing it, only people that was kind of in that story would really get a real bio. Or if they were Earth 2, they would get a bio, but otherwise it'd be like, nah, we cut out a lot of this stuff. We nixed it. Without saying it, they just kind of said this is the origin of stuff. But yeah, it's
writers didn't want to do it. They kept, the fans are confused. Like, no, we don't want to do this. There's a lot of work. We don't want to do this. Let's start over again, and we can just make it up as we go along by doing what? We'll come up with some stories. Oh wow, we got nothing. Hey, we can bring back a lot of this Silver Age stuff. We get 10 years out of that.
Well, you can also see it's really more of a Marv thing, where probably Marv and Lynn would probably something they talk with each other about, saying, hey, this DC thing is kind of wacky. Let's see if we can clean it up. And then you had someone Roy Thomas, who lived in the Golden Age, and he's like, use whatever. You want me to switch up these characters? Yeah, okay, we can do new Wildcat, this and the other guy, Infinity Inc. And this wait a second, you totally gutted my All-Star Squadron. I can't do this no more, huh? Okay, well, but you got your Infinity Inc. It would be those legacy ones that are left, but they're kind of lost. I can make stories out of it, but I didn't expect it to be to gut my whole thing, the whole place where I was playing around, and no one could really bother me because it's not in present day. That's ultimately why Roy was doing the Invaders, and that he was like tired of having to call up people and say, can I use this character? No, you can't use this villain now. He's in this long storyline. So, but yeah, it's a big sort of story that they keep. The same way Phoenix is being redone, same way Death of Superman is being redone. So, and this one, this story was about Jonathan. Well, it's almost Dan Jurgens getting to take back Jonathan for a second, having him be young and see his father.
Well, he's not been able to say as much, but I know he doesn't like the direction they took the character in. This was his creation. I know that, and the thing is, the stuff that they were doing with them was working. People liked it, and then this just happens. A new guy comes in, get paid a whole bunch of money. Hey, I'm going to take this guy and totally, just totally do whatever the hell what I want with it, and take a large dunk on whatever it is that you were doing. But so he gets to tell a story with Jonathan Kent, who really should still be a kid. Especially when you have the whole Batman versus Superman, the Super Sons, animated coming out. It's so schizophrenic when you look, and they're still doing it. They're still doing it. They're still doing stuff with him as a kid, but they want to push the other. But they want to push the other side as well, which is pretty much we don't want to tell no to either person.
Yeah.
And we don't. So as long as Jurgens wants to do it, I'm pretty certain he'll. I'm not sure how that'll. I'm really not sure how that ends up being resolved. Because I'm pretty certain if Jurgen wants to do it, he's just going to use Jonathan as a kid. That'll be the end of that. He's like, why should I do that? This is not. This is the character I created. He never got a chance to be a kid. So every time I get my hands on him, he's going to get to be a kid. And then you got Tom Taylor, like, no, he can represent this new generation. He's going to be bi. He's going to be out in the parade, and he's not going to throw any punches. He's going to be.
Hey! We're definitely going down the wrong line now. We don't need to touch that.
You saying he can't talk about what's in the stories? That's what you're saying? Are you trying to not being inclusive, Mars?
Not doing that. I'm just saying, hey, we're going down the wrong line. Jurgens had many options to write many Superman stories, and he's chosen the ones that he was interested in writing. But we're just getting back to the 30th anniversary. So hey, overall, you guys think it's a positive thing that they're reissuing it once more, and if you have a chance, you should get out to get it because it's going to sell. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, again, you got to look. You have they did Death of Superman. Okay, you had Nightfall for Batman. You had Wonder Woman losing. Wonder Woman lost the title of Wonder Woman to Artemis. You had Green Lantern going bat scat crazy in Emerald. What was it like? Emerald
Emerald
Twilight.
Dawn. Oh
Emerald
no,
Dawn.
sorry.
Emerald Twilight. Emerald
Twilight. Okay,
Twilight.
yeah.
You had Green Arrow. You had Green Arrow. You had Green Arrow died. I think. What was the big thing with Aquaman? I think Aquaman just got his hand chewed off or something. I don't even know if that was.
Yeah, it was.
If that was
I think
part.
that was before, but all the others are pretty much right on. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty. You had that going, and Martian Manhunter was just ducking for cover. He was like, "Look, if somebody pulls out a match, I'm done. So I gotta wait. I gotta hope this dies down pretty quickly." And then the stuff that happened with other publishers as well when they were like trying to tap into it. Of all that stuff, that came out, all that reverberation that came out of the death of Superman. The only storyline that they can still do this stuff with is the death of Superman. Okay, right now they got Ben Riley up in the Spider-Man stories, and that got some people saying, "Oh yeah, Ben Riley, he was a pretty good guy. We should have never got rid of him." What? What are you talking about? But
Yeah.
but it's not the same. I mean, the clone saga with Spider-Man was received so poorly when people got wind of what the hell was happening and how it technically invalidated all the stories they had been reading. That actually put a hard stop to a lot of that stuff because of where they were going with it. But Death of Superman still has that. It still has that resonance. I was shocked when all these variants. I mean, these are expensive variants. We're talking $50 a copy, to buy certain books, $100 a copy to buy certain books, and they're all sold out.
But it's
They're all
very
sold
interesting
out
that
at
you
the end of
guys,
the day.
the Death of Superman is definitely going to come out, and they're going to have, what did you say, the Friends of Superman, the Funeral of Superman, the one afterwards?
It's a death.
It was Death of Superman, Funeral for a Friend, Reign of the Superman.
So Funeral for a Friend comes out. The 30th anniversary also is coming out. So are they going to cover that? And Reign of Superman.
No, that's all one. That's all one thing.
They're going to have it all in. So I guess that's why people forget about it.
Death of Superman is all of that. It's not, oh, we got to do 30th anniversary of Death of Superman. Now we do 30th anniversary of Funeral for a Friend. That's one large. Death of Superman is considered that entire storyline. It's one large storyline,
including the reigns, all the reign, the different.
Yeah, if you buy it in an omnibus, it's going to be the Death and Return of Superman, but it includes all those stories.
All right, so hey, let's wrap it up. So, like I said, we think if you like the Superman story, if you think this is something that you're interested in, especially go out to get it. Especially that the prices are definitely going to go up because.
Well, before you end it, I just want to bring out one point. Sorry,
it's the second time. That's what I just want to say.
Well, I'm just saying. Oh my goodness. If you look at when they were trying to do, what was it, like the ultimatum or whatever, where Spider-Man dies in the Ultimate Universe or whatever the thing they were doing in there, they did a story where Spider-Man dies and they had the effect of the heroes on the other heroes. But ultimately, in truth, it would be totally different. But Bendis kind of wrote a similar thing where people were very much affected by the death of Spider-Man, whereas ultimately he was a local hero. They'd probably be like, "Oh yeah, I like that guy. I'm sorry to hear that." It would be way different. But he kind of did the death of Superman in the Ultimate Universe with Spider-Man, which was kind of just taking that story and aping it, which is he shouldn't have done it. He should have done, like, I think similar when Marvel Girl came back in the Fantastic Four issue and she's fighting the Fantastic Four and Captain America's like, "You're a Marvel Girl, right?" It's like they've only met like a couple times and not like the readers. The readers think that these guys all know each other, but in truth, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember. We hadn't seen Marvel Girl in a long time," that sort of thing. Whereas he did, the thing is, it's a big sort of thing. Spider-Man's death to the fans, but in story, it doesn't work the same way Superman works. So I just wanted to point that out, that even later on in the Ultimate Universe, you had the idea of Spider-Man dying and then having this effect on the world where they like feel different, where can't, it's just copying off of, they're different characters, totally different. And in the real regular thing, J. Jonah Jameson might have a parade for his death. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah.
You close it out.
Any final words, Cal, before we close it?
If you enjoyed Death of Superman, you will probably enjoy what they do right here. So go out, pick it up, add it to your collection. And if you're a Superman fan who does not own the complete run of Death of Superman, I'm putting together a complete run, which you can get for a reasonable price.
So one last thing. For those
just hit us up in the comments.
So people who haven't read it or been involved in it, why should they get it?
If you haven't read this, why should you read it?
Yeah.
I'll be frank. If you haven't read it, you probably aren't a comic book reader from the last 50 years. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this storyline. But if you're somebody who's coming in and you're new and you want to read solid storytelling on a classic character, that's all the reason you need to get in. That's all the reason you need to get in and read. And hey, you don't even have. I mean, they got all this stuff at the library. You don't even have to go and put down like a whole bunch of money for it at the end of the day. You could go to your local library, get the whole thing, read it there. But if you really want to immerse yourself in the DC universe and understand how that world functions, this is the story that you need. This is a great story to start with.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, hey, everybody, if you like...
Hey, what about me? What about why should you read it for me, right? I would say... I especially like the Grummett and the Bogdanov issues, so the fighting and that sort of thing, that initial thing where he popped up in the what's the name by John Bogdanov was really cool. I really like that portion of it. So art wise, and you want a big slam bam fight, there you go. That's what that's what I'll give you. Right? What are you laughing about?
Not a damn thing.
Yeah, whatever.
Not a damn thing.
Right. Hey, close it out before somebody gets wise to something else.
Spinner Rack.
Out.
Thumbs up if you like, comment, thumbs up. Spinner Rack out.